kind of just like putting yourself in your customer's shoes. And I know we've talked about this before. They're called buyer legends, and they're really neat. I haven't done one in a couple of years, but basically what you do is you run a reverse chronological order of your customer's buying experience with your business. You start with like essentially them like paying you, right? Is the first step. Then you go back a step and you're like, oh, like we invoiced them. Then we go back a step. And then number 3, if you're picturing this as a bullet point list, is like, we finished the job. Number 4 is we worked on the job. 5 is we showed up. And then what you try to do is you try to find those little sub bullets of ways that you could improve that process. And what you'll find is not only could you make a potentially better customer experience, but you might improve your sales conversion. You might find ways that they are going to have something that's worth talking about to their neighbors, kind of like we were discussing, and like, oh my gosh, they made me a video, that kind of thing. And I think there's just a lot of ways that you can create content, whether it be video, infographics, a nice sales presentation. So if you can be super, super responsive, that's really important.
I think taking the temperature outside the analytics that you're paying for. So what I mean by that is assuming that these companies are paying consultants or, or monitoring their own metrics about what their candidate, the input rate is, what their cycle time is for filling positions. Kind of get away from that and really talk to people. They do the exit interviews when people leave organizations. I think, maybe if there was an ability to talk to the people that either you didn't hire or the people that you've recently hired to ask how that process went, from start to finish, from the minute that they were associated with your brand, and not as customers, although they are customers in that regard. Yeah. But I don't mean the customers that are buying your product, but customers that are essentially buying into your brand. How was that experience for you? How did we meet your expectations? What would you have wished we had done differently? Yeah. I think maybe it's more of a grassroots effort.
I think it's really counterintuitive early on to narrow your focus, like narrow down in terms of your market, in terms of your products. The example I usually use is when I first opened up, we were going to be like, video for the web production. And then I, didn't really know how to get up and running very well. So I started doing graphic design, which I had a background in, and web design and other things. And the wider we got in terms of services, the less efficient I was as a business, right? Because like I always come back to, and this is an overused quote, but there's the Einstein quote with the thing should be as simple as possible and not simpler. Like to find that space where you have made the vision of your business as simple as possible with as narrow an intention without being so simple that, so narrow, so honed in that there's not enough people there to populate your client ranks it's a tricky balancing act. And I think that is my advice, though. Go narrower than you think, especially at first.
Where I start to feel disengaged is when there's not that clarity around those roles, because sometimes what ends up happening is you start absorbing more and more work because you're a performer. And then you start having this narrative of like, why am I doing this? Like, cool. Like if I work hard and I do a really great job, I can start absorbing other people's tasks and duties on occasion. And for me, that was a very frustrating experience. So again, I think that's something where if you have clear communication, clear onboarding, clear responsibilities, and all of that, duties, process, everything, then it's just like, okay, there's overlap here. This person's responsible. You're going to help them in this way. And I think it kind of clears up some of that confusion and just kind of messiness that you see sometimes in collaborative work. I don't know what you feel about that, but.
Oh, I think that's the essence of dysfunction that you're describing right there. It's without the clear system, without a system, there's no clarity in the role, right? And we can go back to the job descriptions and things that we were talking about. But at the end of the day, that job description has to be implemented through a system.
My favorite really is understanding that what we now know about anxiety has evolved a ton as our understanding of the brain has evolved, right? So understanding what's amygdala-based anxiety versus what's cortical-based anxiety. So the fight or flight-based anxiety versus surface brain anxiety. So you need a therapist that understands the difference between those two things, because you don't do talk work with fight or flight brain. That's not how it works. We do what's called somatic therapy, right? Because your amygdala talks to your body, right? That's why your heart beats and you get sweaty and your blood pressure goes up. So you have to use your body to talk back to your amygdala. So you need a therapist that has that toolbox, all right? So when you're interviewing a therapist is, what do you recommend for somebody who has panic attacks? And what do you recommend for somebody who freezes? And what do you recommend? This is all that fight or flight based anxiety. And then when we come over to surface brain anxiety, okay, the stories that we tell and the endless problem solving sessions, or God forbid, you're one of those artistic, creative people that can actually see things, going wrong in your head. The fire engine drives by and you go, did I leave the stove on? And can you picture your kitchen catching on fire, right? That's all surface brain stuff. So do they have the tools in their toolbox to help you discern between the different types, number one? And then what do they recommend for those things, right? What do they recommend for those different things? And just getting a sense of, are you in this realm of the evolved way that we're looking at anxiety?
Really comes down to trust, right? So employers are looking for, employees they can trust. Employees are looking for the ability to trust their employers. And I think that's the most important thing, because if an employee knows that the employer has their back and they have a good enough relationship where it isn't really the leader is being a leader because they're a part of the team and not some figurehead, then those are the organizations that can be extremely successful. And it kind of goes back to some of the other things that we were saying in regards to, giving everyone an opportunity, empowering them to speak and share their ideas, no matter how crazy they are. Because that's how you move forward.
I think a lot of business challenges like customer experience and customer service and lost customers and those KPIs that we focus on, they're always tied to a human person perspective. And quicker in us in HR that say, this is our challenge here. We have a high turnover rate in our call center, and we've seen turnover increase and we've seen customer satisfaction decrease. There's a correlation here. We think we need to start investing and seeing what's going on in here. Will you allow us? And it's yes, because every customer lost is worth X to the business. And if we get customers that are happy, they're going to sell it for us. So then we don't need as much of a sales team. And then it's just so many things are connected. It's how quickly can we connect the dots.
So you want to ensure that if you're using any type of assessment or you're trying to determine who you're going to bring into your team, that if you're using a selection tool, it is validated as such. There are the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that oversees discrimination in the workplace, has weighed in on this. And this was quite a few years ago, but they weighed in. And you cannot be using an assessment that even unintentionally is discriminatory towards a group of people, whether it's age or race or gender or what have you, right? If you want to test skills, right, which is a different conversation. So let's say you need someone who has, a certain level of skill in Excel or a certain software program, or you want to give them kind of like an on-the-job, you're hiring someone to be an assistant. Here's a letter with some typos in and some errors. Can you fix it? You're much safer doing those types of things that are actually connected to the work the person's going to be doing. Maybe we have a team that they need some refresh and rework in team dynamics, and just taking that pause and that breath and to have some terminology and some ways learning about different styles and approaches, then DISC is really a great tool for that. And the reason I love that over others is the simplicity of it. So I think that's where you have to start, because if you're just oh, this is great, look at this framework, this looks great, and it's not really, you got to look at it a little deeper and see, is this really something that's going to help with what we've identified as the gap here?
the fundamentals of email marketing aren't really changing, I think is also right, at least mostly right, if not totally right. That all depends on how people are approaching email. And I don't think this is a fundamental that would have changed based on this new Apple privacy law, or option. But people need to think about why they're emailing people in the first place. The reality is that people are busy and there is an increasing demand for their attention. But I don't know about you, like there's still only 24 hours in the day. Like buyers have a fixed amount of time and attention to give, but there is an increased demand for it because anybody with a business idea or a startup and an internet connection can now try to influence me. So what that means is that buyers are in control because what else happens when there's more demand than supply, right? The suppliers can win, right? And so in order to overcome that, marketers need to be really thoughtful about what they're sending to people and why, because every email is you're basically saying, I'm asking for your time. And what is more valuable than your time? So you need to make it very clear right from the beginning that you are going to honor the time and attention that somebody gives you, right? That you have earned by interrupting them with something as small as an email. And if you can do that and make those and add value and make that the time that they spend paying attention to you and your content worthwhile, then you can win.